Keith Urban is on stage for his first show since Nicole Kidman filed for divorce.
For nearly 20 years, Nicole Kidman and Keith Urban professed their love for one another in interviews and appeared an unbreakable unit.
Hollywood just got some huge news that nobody expected. For years, people wondered about Nicole Kidman and Keith Urban's marriage. Now, Russell Crowe is finally speaking up, and what he's saying is really shocking. Nicole Kidman, you are an amazing friend. You have a huge heart and you're super loyal. Russell is one of their closest friends. He's seen things that the rest of us never knew about. Now, what he's telling us is making everyone talk. What secret has he been keeping all these years? Today, we're going to find out Russell Crowe's surprising truth about Nicole and Keith. The friend who was always there. In Hollywood, friendships don't always last. A lot of times, famous people are only friends because they're in movies together. But Nicole Kidman had one friendship that was different. Her friendship with Russell Crowe was real and strong. Their friendship didn't start at a fancy movie party. It started back in Australia in the late 1980s. They were both young actors trying to make it big. They understood each other because they both wanted the same thing, to be successful. "I'm a person living my life with grief, pain, and loss," Nicole once said. This friendship started far away from all the cameras. It created a special bond of loyalty. Through every rumor and every heartbreak, Russell Crowe stayed by her side. When cameras showed her with Tom Cruise, and later when that marriage ended, Crowe was still there for her. He was her safe person in a world that doesn't give you many safe places. That's why what he says matters so much. Things changed to a completely different level. I think the day I realized something was really different. Russell wasn't some stranger reading gossip magazines. He was actually there, seeing everything happen. And he was there that special night in January 2005 at a fancy party. That's the night everything changed. From across the room, Crowe watched Nicole Kidman meet a country singer named Keith Urban for the first time. He saw the spark between them, but he also saw Nicole wasn't sure about it. That's the fun part, when you start looking at something and you think, I can't do this. People close to all three of them say that Crowe helped them get together. He created chances for them to talk and helped Nicole feel better about it. He watched their love story from the very beginning. He never knew that one day he would be the one telling everyone how it ended. A love that seemed impossible to break. For almost 20 years, Nicole Kidman and Keith Urban told everyone they loved each other. They seemed like they could never break up. Their romance didn't start fast. After they first met, Nicole said she wasn't even sure if Keith liked her. "You know, this is an hour and a half of hair and makeup." For 4 whole months, he didn't even call her. But when he finally got brave enough to call, their romance started fast. Keith took Nicole for a ride on his Harley-Davidson motorcycle to a quiet place for a picnic. Nicole said that was the moment she knew she loved him. She liked jumping into serious relationships quickly. On June 25, 2006, just a year and a half after they met, they got married. It was like a perfect fairy tale. Everyone believed that two superstars could actually live happily ever after. Two of Australia's biggest stars got married. But this is where the story gets harder. The perfect picture starts to crack, and you see what it really took to keep their love alive. Just 4 months after their wedding, the fairy tale fell apart. In October 2006, Keith Urban had been fighting problems with drugs and alcohol for a long time. He got bad again and had to go back to rehab. Later, he told Rolling Stone magazine very honestly, "I caused my new marriage to fall apart." Most relationships would have ended right there. But Nicole Kidman did something amazing. She didn't leave. She didn't make a big announcement. She canceled everything: movie promotions, work, everything. She stopped her whole life to stay with the man she just married, but she was also smart about it. I'm lucky to have a strong husband and strong faith. I have both those things. She told People magazine that she figured out something important. She couldn't save him. He had to save himself. Her job was to love him and be there for him. It took incredible strength and patience. Against all odds, their marriage survived. Nicole and Keith, right there you go. Ah, that's wonderful, that's perfect. Nicole, you look this way, guys. Keith said later that he was born into her, that Nicole gave him what he needed to leave his bad habits behind. From where he was watching, Russell Crowe saw all of this happen. He knew this wasn't just another Hollywood romance. This was a love story that went through really hard times. They had survived something that would have destroyed most people. That's why what happened later is so sad. The problem of being apart. After getting through Keith's recovery, their marriage seemed unbreakable. They had faced the biggest problem and won. But as years went by, a different problem started creeping in. It was something they couldn't fix in 30 days. It was being apart from each other all the time. Keith Urban's job meant he had to tour a lot. He spent about 200 days every year away from home. That's more than half the year. Just a day after the shocking news that she split from Keith Urban after 19 years of marriage. For more than half of every year, they were living in different worlds. They could only talk on the phone and write love letters. In an interview, Keith himself told everyone how hard that life was. When you wake up on a tour bus at 3:30 in the morning and you're really sick and you miss your friends and family and you're completely lonely and miserable, you ask yourself, why am I doing this? Being lonely night after night in different cities creates an empty feeling, and empty feelings are dangerous. People close to the couple said the separation really hurt them emotionally. A source tells us she is heartbroken about the split. She tried everything to save their 19-year marriage. According to Crowe, Keith started pulling away several years ago. They've been getting more distant ever since, and they stopped being close. Being far apart physically was creating an emotional gap that no amount of love seemed able to fix. Warning signs of secret problems. In this growing gap, some really worrying warning signs started showing up. From Russell Crowe's point of view, these weren't just normal marriage problems. These were behavior changes that suggested something more was going on. The first and most obvious sign was Keith's phone. Keith supposedly became really protective of it. He would turn it face down on tables, take it with him to every room, and get defensive if Nicole asked who he was texting. For a couple married for almost 20 years, this sudden secrecy about his phone was really scary. Working things out and give us some space. We have jumped to the last chapter of the story. That defensiveness started showing up in their conversations. When Nicole would ask normal wife questions about his day on tour, Keith's answers became short and vague. He seemed emotionally distant even when he was home, like his mind was somewhere else. He seemed like he was just pretending everything was okay. But maybe the most telling sign was something that happened in public. Around the same time, Nicole was getting suspicious in private. Keith's public declarations of love became more frequent and more emotional. At the AFI ceremony in April 2024, he gave a tearful tribute to his wife. Nicole, my wife Nicole Mary, is here tonight. 4 months into our marriage, my addiction blew our marriage apart and she chose love. Barely 4 months into our marriage, my addictions that I had done really nothing about. At the time, the world saw a loving husband honoring his wife. But according to Russell Crowe, this was something else. It was overcompensation. He was performing devotion for the cameras, creating a perfect public story that covered up what he was really doing in private. This is common with cheating. The louder the public praise, the more it can hide a private betrayal. and Crowe, watching from the inside, reportedly saw this painful difference. A woman's gut feeling. Nicole Kidman is not someone who is easily fooled. She's smart, aware, and has good instincts. The smiles she gave on red carpets hid a growing worry. The public act was one thing, but behind closed doors, she was investigating her own life. Slowly, she was putting together a puzzle she didn't want to solve. Her behavior started changing in small but important ways. She started checking social media accounts connected to Keith's tour, looking for things that didn't match up. Crowe noticed she started making surprise visits to his concerts. To the public, it looked supportive, but really she was trying to find out the truth. The emotional stress started showing up in her work. Directors working with her noticed moments of unexpected emotional fragility, especially during scenes about betrayal or abandonment. It was like the line between her character's pain and her own pain had started to blur. The deepest pain was only shared in private. Russell Crowe witnessed a moment that confirmed the public smiles were fake. He saw Nicole backstage after one of Keith's shows, crying. It was raw and unguarded, the display of a heart that was breaking. It was during moments like these that Nicole reportedly turned to her longtime friend. She didn't just share a vague feeling of loneliness. She told him about specific concerns that had started to bother her. There was a fan photo that seemed too friendly. "It's a lovely moment of celebration. Kissed my husband too. Well, there he is right there." And there was a story from someone on Keith's crew that didn't match what Keith had told her. Each incident was a small crack in the foundation of her trust, and together they formed a pattern she couldn't ignore anymore. A confrontation was coming. The discovery. The breaking point didn't come with a loud crash. It came in the quiet blue glow of a phone screen late one night. For years, Nicole Kidman had lived with a quiet, nagging feeling. A feeling she tried to dismiss as normal anxiety for a wife whose husband lived half his life on the road. But gut feelings don't disappear when you ignore them. They wait. And in one devastating moment, her worst fears came true. According to Crowe, Nicole found some really concerning messages on Keith's phone. They weren't unclear or confusing. The messages were supposedly with a female backup singer from his touring band. As Nicole scrolled through the conversations, a cold reality set in. The messages suggested private meetings arranged during times Keith said he was working late in recording studios. It was clear, calculated lying. The timing of finding this out was especially cruel. Nicole was in the middle of filming a demanding role. The process left her emotionally raw and vulnerable. Being betrayed is one thing. Being betrayed when you're at your weakest is another. The account supposedly described by Russell Crowe suggests that Nicole told him after finding the messages. Her voice wasn't just angry but deeply hurt. This wasn't the first time she'd been suspicious, but it was the first time she had undeniable proof. This was the end of making excuses. The breaking point had arrived. The 4-hour fight. The confrontation supposedly happened in December 2018 after a holiday party. People noticed Keith spent most of the evening on his phone, distant and secretive. When they got home and had privacy, the carefully constructed act of their public life finally fell apart. What started as a simple, direct question about his secretive texting turned into a 4-hour conversation that lasted until sunrise. This wasn't a screaming match. It was a methodical, heartbreaking presentation of the truth. Throughout the conversation, Nicole supposedly showed Keith the specific evidence she'd gathered over months. Not just the damning text messages, but differences in his travel stories and unexplained expenses that now made terrible sense. She laid out the pattern of betrayal piece by painful piece. By the time morning came, Nicole had given what friends describe as her final warning. It was an ultimatum delivered with cold, quiet clarity from a woman who had reached her absolute limit. The terms were non-negotiable: complete and total transparency from that moment forward, a significantly reduced touring schedule, and an immediate commitment to couples therapy. This was his one and only chance to save their marriage. Keith, faced with undeniable evidence, supposedly promised to change. He promised everything. The point of no return. For a few fragile months, it seemed like the promise might hold. The couple appeared to be working through their issues. They even renewed their vows in a small ceremony that suggested a renewed commitment, according to an insider. To the outside world, the crisis was over. The fairy tale was back on track. But this reconciliation proved to be temporary and heartbreaking. Russell's revelations suggest that by summer, Keith had returned to his concerning patterns. The promises made in those desperate early morning hours were broken. This was the final, unforgivable betrayal. It wasn't just the initial act of cheating that destroyed the marriage. It was the disrespect of breaking the final warning. It was realizing that the man she had saved, the man she had sacrificed so much for, was either unwilling or unable to keep his word. This timeline explains everything that confused the public. It explains the loving anniversary posts in June 2025, a moment when Nicole was still holding onto hope. And it explains the cold, hard reality of Keith signing divorce papers just weeks later on August 29th. The decision was made. There was no long drawn-out separation, no public statements about trying to work it out. Once the final warning was broken, Nicole moved forward with swift and silent determination. The trust wasn't just damaged. It had been completely destroyed beyond any hope of repair. The time for warnings was over. The time for consequences had begun. The evidence in the silence. When a 20-year Hollywood marriage ends, it's usually not quiet. It's usually a chaotic circus of competing press statements, mysterious social media posts, and long court battles played out in tabloids. But the end of Nicole Kidman and Keith Urban's marriage was different. It was clean, efficient, and almost eerily silent. And in that silence, the evidence of what truly happened speaks volumes. The court documents filed in Davidson County, Tennessee on September 30th used the standard boring phrase, irreconcilable differences. But the details of the settlement agreement signed months before the public even knew there was trouble painted a much clearer picture. This wasn't a friendly mutual breakup. This was a reckoning, and the terms were dictated from a position of undeniable moral high ground. The most telling detail was the custody arrangement. Keith Urban, a man who had built his public image around being a devoted family man, agreed to have custody of his daughters for just 59 days a year. That's only 17%. Most fathers would fight hard against such an unfair arrangement. Keith's quiet acceptance suggests he knew he was in no position to argue. If he had fought it, he would have risked a long legal battle where embarrassing details of his behavior, the text messages, the secret meetings, could have been exposed in open court. The silence was the price of his privacy. The financial settlement was just as revealing. Both Nicole and Keith make good money, so neither would be required to pay alimony. But in a highly unusual move, Keith had already prepaid his child support in one big payment. This wasn't just about financial responsibility. It was about cutting ties. A single payment meant there would be no ongoing monthly contact, no future financial connections, and no lingering accountability. It was the legal equivalent of a clean break, done with the speed and precision of a man who knows he has no power to negotiate for anything more. Everything about the proceedings pointed to a cheating scenario. I know the feeling of having to just be in the grind day after day after day. The betrayed spouse, Nicole, made the terms. The guilty party, Keith, accepted the consequences without resistance to avoid public embarrassment. The speed of it all, from a broken promise in summer to signed legal documents in August, wasn't the sign of a love that slowly faded. It was the sign of trust that had been decisively and catastrophically destroyed. Why the Protector spoke up. In the tightly guarded world of A-list celebrities, there's an unspoken rule that's set in stone. You don't discuss the personal lives of your friends. It's the ultimate betrayal of trust. Russell Crowe, a man known for his intense loyalty and hatred of celebrity gossip, had followed this code his entire career. So when whispers of his perspective on the Kidman-Urban split began to surface, the entire industry was stunned. Why would he break his silence now? What could possibly make a man so private step into something so sensitive? The answer, according to people close to the situation, is rooted in the same principle he's lived by for decades: loyalty. As news of the divorce began to spread, and this is many of the 37 pages that make up their divorce filing, a subtle but damaging story started to take shape. People were being led to believe that Keith was the heartbroken, devoted husband whose touring schedule just created unfortunate distance. Nicole, by contrast, was being painted as the cold, distant wife who walked away. I knew we were onto a good thing when my sister and my husband saw the film, and they both came out crying. Russell Crowe had seen this happen before. He knew how quickly a false media story could become what everyone believes is true. He supposedly couldn't stand by and watch his friend, a woman who had given everything to her marriage only to be betrayed, be so misunderstood and misrepresented. His decision to speak wasn't about spreading gossip. It was about protecting a reputation. It was an act of correction, a strategic move to make sure the real story was known. Nicole didn't just walk away. She was pushed away, and only after she had given her husband one final chance to do the right thing. Some Hollywood insiders even suggested that Crowe was acting as a messenger, saying aloud the things Nicole couldn't say herself while bound by legal discretion. It's a tactic as old as fame itself. When the spotlight is too bright, you let a trusted friend whisper the truth for you. Whether it was a personal crusade or a coordinated strategy, the motivation was clear. Russell Crowe broke the celebrity code of silence for one reason: to defend the honor of his friend. A legacy of grace. In the aftermath of the quiet legal storm, two very different pictures emerged. On one side, reports suggested that Keith Urban was taking the split much harder than anyone expected. He canceled several appearances and was said to be avoiding the press altogether. People close to him described him as embarrassed and tired of being painted as the bad guy. He had retreated from the spotlight. His silence was a stark contrast to the gushing public declarations of love that had once defined his marriage. Whether it was guilt or the pain of public perception, the once unflappable country star appeared diminished. On the other side stood Nicole Kidman. There were no dramatic displays of sorrow, no mysterious social media posts, and certainly no public mudslinging. It was actually weird because I didn't get to really know them as Nicole until I got to know them as Marcia. Instead, the world saw a woman who carried her heartbreak with quiet, steely strength. Sources close to her said she was hurt and feeling betrayed, yet her focus remained unshakable. She continued to show up for work, delivering powerful performances and keeping her professional commitments with unwavering grace. Her energy wasn't directed at the past but firmly on moving forward, protecting her daughters, and continuing the work that has defined her life. For me, It was just so exciting as well because it's such a great role, you know. She handled the end of her marriage the same way she'd handled every other crisis in her life, with profound and formidable dignity. Her conduct wasn't a performance for the public. It was the authentic expression of a woman who has weathered the deepest of betrayals and emerged not broken but refined. Beyond the betrayal. In the end, the story that Russell Crowe's revelation brought to light is not simply about the tragic end of a Hollywood marriage. It's a display of Nicole Kidman's character. For nearly 20 years, she was the anchor, the savior, the unwavering believer in a love story she fought to protect. Well, it's official. These court documents show that after almost 20 years of marriage, Nicole Kidman and Keith Urban are getting divorced. She offered her loyalty, her patience, and her forgiveness, even in the face of addiction and distance. When she finally discovered the ultimate betrayal, she offered one last thing, a final chance. When that chance was disrespected and her trust was broken forever, she acted with swift, quiet determination like a leader, not a victim. She carefully protected her children and her own dignity, cutting ties with surgical precision that left no room for drama or guessing games. The fairy tale may have ended, but the queen remains, thanks to the loyalty of a lifelong friend who refused to let a false story take hold. Raw and very, very emotional, the award for me, and she did, but now I'm on stage. The world can now see the full picture. Her legacy is not defined by the man who broke her heart, but by the unbreakable strength with which she quietly and firmly reclaimed her throne.